The silent breakup. The hardest part wasn't the screaming. There were no shattered plates, no venomous accusations, and no slamming doors. In fact, if the neighbors had been listening, they would have thought Elias and Sarah were finally at peace. But peace is often just the absence of sound, not the presence of harmony. The beginning of the end. It started months ago with the unasked questions. How was your day? Became a chore. What are you thinking? Became a risk. Do you still love me? Became a terrifying void. They sat on their velvet sofa, the one they had spent 3 paychecks on back when they were building a life, and watched a movie they didn't care about. Elias reached for the popcorn, his hand grazing Sarah's. Usually, she would intertwine her fingers with his. Today, she simply moved her hand to tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear. It was a small movement, a flicker, but to Elias, it felt like a tectonic shift. The weight of silence. They lived in a gallery of their former selves. The framed photos on the hallway wall showed a couple who laughed until their ribs ached. Now, they moved through the apartment like 2 ghosts haunting the same house, careful not to collide. Dinner was a symphony of silverware hitting porcelain. Clink, scrap, swallow. "Could you pass the salt?" Elias asked. "Here," Sarah replied. That was the longest conversation they'd had in 48 hours. He looked at her, really looked at her, and realized her eyes weren't bright anymore. They were just tired. Not lack of sleep tired, but the kind of exhaustion that comes from holding up a ceiling that is slowly collapsing. The breakup didn't happen at a table or in a park. It happened in the middle of the night, in the dark, while they lay 6 inches apart in a queen-sized bed. Elias listened to the rhythm of her breathing. He knew she was awake. He could feel the tension in her shoulders, the way she was holding herself together so she wouldn't spill over. He wanted to reach out, to pull her back to the version of them that made sense. But the air between them had grown too thick. It was filled with every word they hadn't said, every hurt they had tucked away to deal with later, and every realization that they were no longer the people the other person had fallen in love with. Sarah let out a breath, a long, shaky exhale that sounded like a white flag. She didn't turn around. She didn't say a word. She just shifted further toward the edge of the mattress. The aftermath. The next morning, Elias woke up to a cold bed. There was no note. There was no "we need to talk." There was just a dresser with 1 less jewelry box and a closet that felt cavernous with half its contents gone. He walked into the kitchen and saw 2 mugs on the counter. He had started the coffee out of habit. He looked at her favorite blue mug, then slowly put it back in the cupboard, behind the plates, where he wouldn't have to see it. The silence wasn't a lack of noise anymore. It was a physical weight, pressing against his chest, confirming what they both already knew. They hadn't fought for their relationship because, somewhere along the way, they had both realized there was nothing left to fight for. They didn't break up with a bang, they simply stopped being, leaving behind nothing but the echo of a door closing softly. Forever.